Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're having a wonderful day and that you're enjoying the festive period. Some of you will have seen me on transfer plans last night, some of you this morning, some of you this afternoon, and some of you just a minute ago. But such is the nature of the video upload schedule given the tight turnaround. Today, I have for you everything you need to know, or sort of. There are a few topics which I've reserved for solving your problems, just to ensure that this video isn't too long, and also because given the tight turnaround, there are less freshly arising problems that likely come up for Thursday's deadline. So I thought it better to place them there. For example, captaincy, because Salah is largely the front runner, especially after the mega haul against Spurs, and wildcard 18, so that I could give some more time to you guys who want that. Aside from that, there's not much else to say before we get into the video, apart from 37.3% of you have not subscribed yet who watch regularly. So if you could consider pressing the button and press it, I would be greatly appreciative. I will check the number again tonight, and hopefully it's gone down since I last checked it. But like I said, without anything else needing to be said, let's hop into the video. There is one very important thing to understand about the challenge that Saka's injury has posed us. There are only two midfielders in the game who are more expensive than Bukayo Saka, thus everyone else is now accessible. However, the fact that we don't have a front runner, the fact that so much content is being produced around this subject, and the fact that it's having to go so in depth shows that all of the options have some problems attached to them, some upside, and it's all fairly close between them, at least to the naked eye, from a broader, less analytical perspective, which means that there's a lot of opportunities because there's going to be a huge split regarding where people go. So the swings will be big just as a result of that. And also all of them in their own way have their own upside attached. Otherwise, there wouldn't be options in the first place. So recognize this as a big opportunity rather than a problem. And I think that's useful for life as well, but not come here for that. The best replacements, in my opinion, are listed on screen, or at least the ones that we need to consider. I'm not going to list them. I was going to, but there's 12. You can read them. Now I will get onto all of them individually, and we can analyze them, assess them, and then from there, you can essentially decide what you think is the best with my analysis combined with your own, of course. We will start with the most expensive of the bunch, Heung-min Son, and here I state that role equals restriction. And for him specifically, I think it really has done in terms of his output. Why? Well, he's essentially holding the touchline on the left-hand side, and when you look at the type of player he is and what his routes to point are, they aren't really facilitated by that type of role. He's someone you want, at least in a close-ish proximity to the box, so he can leverage his ball striking and his finishing, which is some of the best the Premier League has ever seen, specifically relating to his finishing. Also, having him closer, so the goal to the box in that left half space, allows him to combine with others for those small space combinations, which he's very good at doing. Also, in opportunities for transitions and where there is the ability to exploit space in behind, he's better served or better able to do that when he's slightly narrower. However, on the touchline, that's far more difficult, right? Because the roles and what he carries out, the functions he carries out, well, they're completely different. There are a lot of small space combinations, but maybe traditionally it's Udogie coming through that left half space. Maddison maybe slightly deeper if he's playing in the side and Kulusevski's playing in the middle as well. So Maddison's playing on the left. That's another thing that he's doing, right? He's really facilitating everything else, and he's essentially demonstrating what a slightly older school Dutch winger would, whereby they're not meant to come inside too much. They're meant to stay wider, and they're meant to function in the side as mainly an assist provider who scores a lack of goals and really does hold the width for a variety of tactical reasons, right? So for me, it's a big no-no. Obviously, he's still Son. He's got the quality. He'll get in the position sometimes, but it's the volume at which he does so I really don't like. And then the fixtures, they're awkward, right? Because you've got a very tough trip away to Nottingham Forest, who are flying, and who knows, maybe they'll find themselves in the Champions League next season. But even after that, Wolves at home, new manager, not a bad fixture, but could be slightly awkward. Newcastle, and then it's a little bit tougher after that with some tough away games. I think away to Everton and Arsenal as well. So for me, when there's other options with much more upside and security when it comes to fixtures, even though he's got expected minutes and not much competition to his place, I would be steering away. Let's move on to Phil Foden and Kevin De Bruyne. Now, many of you would have seen that I've got Phil Foden in already, so I almost, therefore, by default, have to classify him as a #1 option in this category, and I do, but I didn't explain why. So now I'm going to do that. I would say if you are to adopt a Manchester City asset, you are starting in front of the pack purely due to the fixtures they have. Over the next 5, there is no one, in my opinion, with a better attacking fixture set, or maybe even defensive fixture set than themselves. And that's a great place to start, right? Okay, fine, you could argue that, like, since a certain date, which is quite far away, they've been the worst team in the league in terms of results. Okay, fine, fair enough. But the talent they have in their squad, the manager that they have, at some point, I expect him to find a solution and it to turn somewhat, at least. And with these 5 fixtures, it certainly provides the grounds in which that is most likely to happen. Because if they're not going to do it now, then they're going to struggle to do it when the run turns really ugly after these 5/6 fixtures. Attacking standpoint. Okay, so what is it about Phil Foden, considering we haven't seen much from City, or really himself this season, that I like and made me so confident that I was willing to move early on him because of price change? Well, I don't actually need Phil Foden to really do much to generate me FPL points. And this is the thing. I'm not interested so much as to how Manchester City play with regards to Foden. Given I brought in Guardiola, slightly more because I needed them to well, so they keep clean sheets and transitions, and we'll come on to that later, right? But for now, at least with Foden, I don't need them to do too much, okay? I need Foden to find himself in those number 10 pockets, right? On that right-hand side, where he can leverage his ball striking, where he can, I use the term dance there because he's so good on the ball, just to wriggle around, just maybe bypass a few defenders with his dribbles and just get a shot off, right? That's all I need him to do. And all I need for him to do that is really City's passing network just to fix itself a little bit. Maybe that results in a change of system or philosophy from Prep, which who knows if we'll get. But really, I just need them to be able to get the ball into him, right, in the simplest possible way. And the other thing is I just need him to be a little bit more confident. Okay, and I'm not saying he's not playing with confidence at the moment, but I imagine he was probably more confident when he was having his Player of the Year season last year. And then he's more willing to shoot, more willing to try things, more willing to take responsibility on the ball. And his goal against Aston Villa, I think that's a big thing. And that was actually one of the reasons why I bought him. I think that momentum shift is very helpful. And just getting the ball rolling, considering people were talking about how he hasn't scored this season, will be really, really good for him. And he managed to get a bonus point, or 2 bonus points in that game. And John Duran was really good. And he didn't really do much. So he's clearly good on the bonus point system as well. And I think if he can get the ball enough between the lines, that's great. Because once it gets from there with confidence, I know I'm in the money and I can certainly generate points. Now, against Everton's 4-5-1 deep block, yeah, really difficult to find some space in between the lines. But I didn't just buy him for that. There's the Leicester away fixture. After Ipswich is contained in those 5 fixtures, so I'm really buying him for the whole 5 set. And if I only get like a small return or it's not too good against Everton, I know that I've still got the better fixtures to come anyway. But to be honest, against a side like Everton, if he can ever find a little pocket of space and City can work something, then he's going to be dangerous. De Bruyne's hauls on the cards because of how good he is, and you look at the data as well, which I don't really do too much, but it's really good considering the minutes he's played, and I guess when you adjust it per 90, it's even more impressive. But there's a reason why I say you're playing rock, paper, scissors here. I don't think you're playing purely a guessing game, whereby I would say roulette, but rather when it comes to rock, paper, scissors, especially against some people, you have this intuitive feel, you can read into a few things. And I think you can do that with De Bruyne. Maybe you can predict when he can start. Maybe you can predict his minutes because he has played, or at least close to some 90s this season. You can find out which fixtures are better for him due to like a bit of tactical analysis and matchup analysis. And that's why I say it's rock, paper, scissors as opposed to roulette. So I think there's upside there and there's some plausibility to move, but you have to have a lot of conviction to be able to justify it. But if you do, I don't think it's the worst move in the world. So yeah, that's my case for Phil Foden. The fact that I don't really need much and everything else discussed. And why I don't like Son and De Bruyne too much, mainly because of risks attached in their own ways. From this point on, it gets significantly trickier. And as such, who better to start with than Bruno Fernandes? I use the phrase fixtures are open to interpretation, and I've used that phrase quite a few times in this video, especially compared to normal. Now, why do I say that? Well, you look at the next 3, being Wolves away, Newcastle at home, and Liverpool away. And maybe not so much the Liverpool way, but the first 2, maybe from a broader perspective, where you're not going in deeper, you see that and think, okay, there's points on offer there, especially if you're just looking at the FDR. But I think Molineux will be really up for that game under a new manager, following a 3-0 win against Leicester, United coming off the back of a 3-0 loss against Bournemouth, and Wolves can't really be any worse than they have been this season. So I don't think that'll be a particularly easy game, regardless of where they stand on the table and how many points Wolves have accumulated this season. Then Newcastle, okay, fine. Maybe earlier in the season, this would have been a better game, and you would have been able to hurt Newcastle and score more goals against them. However, they've improved, and they improved a lot. And I think Eddie Howe's definitely been one of the coaches who's been more adaptable this season. And I think he's not got the credit he deserves for that. But again, makes it another tough test for them. And then Liverpool away, okay, fine, they'll be missing Kanate, but still a very tough game, and arguably the toughest game of the season to have, considering they are flying so high at the top of the table. Okay, And the fact that the fixtures are even open to interpretation suggests a lack of conviction because there is that potential downside and there in some significant extent, right? And as such, I'm not super bullish on going here, and you'll see that when I continue with this analysis. I think Man United's performances haven't really been there. Okay, fine, they won 4-0 against Everton. Go and watch the goals and watch the performance. The performance really wasn't all of that. And even the goals stem from pressing, stem from again a corner which gets deflected, and it's just like, okay, fine, but you take maybe the luck out of it or situations that wouldn't happen so often. For example, the way Diallo dispossessed the Everton centre back, I believe it was Tarkowski. Well, take that out of it, and in terms of the actual performances and what's going on in the game for the rest of it, it's not looking particularly great. Okay, fine, they won away at the Etihad, and it was a decent defensive performance, if not a good. No, it was a good defensive performance. But City were very poor, and it's not like United had many moments in the game and they created a flurry of chances. Diallo really just stepped up in a huge way. Okay, and yeah, Bruno returns 9 points, but it's from a penalty. And it helps that he has penalties, right? And set pieces. And in general, from open play, I would say there's the volume of opportunities has still been there, given he's the type of player just to try a lot. And I think that's a good thing. But I personally don't love the fixtures so much, especially in the short term. I don't think there's too much upside associated, even though he's good on the bonus point system, considering how United are playing at the moment, and then when you compare it to other players. So for me, personally, I wouldn't be going here. I don't really understand how people are justifying him over Phil Foden. Okay, yeah, Manchester City are playing worse, but over the next 3, much better fixtures. Over the next 5 as a whole set as well, better fixtures, even though United's turn after those next 3. I would say he's a bigger goal threat than Bruno, even when Bruno plays in one of those 10 positions. And I would say City are a better team. Like, honestly, yeah, fine. They're in horrible form at the moment, but I still trust City more than I would United. So for me, I wouldn't have Bruno Fernandes, albeit not the worst option, right? If he's still playing that number 10, he's still absolute quality. Like I said, the fixtures are open to interpretation. They're not just bad, full stop. The volume of actions is there, etc. But I think given the counter argument I presented, Foden at least is better than him. Martin Odegaard is, again, an interesting one. And there's 2 elements to this, and one we will come on to later, and it has an entire section dedicated to it. And this element is not just restricted to himself, but it is also contained by Luis Diaz and Diogo Jota. When looking at the first element, we can frame this as a very simple problem, and I've discussed the variables here. Okay, second phase work, less shooting in the D, positioning on transition, ceiling, and leveraging physicality. These are what I would say are the negatives. Well, the second phase work isn't good because it just means you are further away from the goal and you have other responsibilities which aren't directly related to output, right? Okay, that's just not a positive, and it never can be, okay? Secondly, not a lot, but quite a few of his goals have come from those shots from outside the box, which he's very good at, and he's delivered with such good accuracy to find the corner and rifle them home within and around that D. But he's doing that at a far lower frequency this year than he has in years gone by and in seasons gone by, right? So you're taking away one of his main routes to point. The league is becoming increasingly transitional based, I would say, with the way teams are playing, and his positioning on transition is never going to be the one to be on the end of the moves, given, I would say, mainly the role he plays, but also the physicality. He's not this unbelievably powerful runner whereby he's going to be able to get on these end of these moves in a very quick fashion either, okay? So that's another thing. Then there's a ceiling, and I would describe him, and we talk about this later, as a low to medium floor and then low-ish ceiling player. How likely is it that he scores 1 goal? Well, not very, but how likely is it that he scores a goal and gets an assist? Not very, but to an even greater extent. And as such, do you really want to be buying a player who fits into that category? No. I think every time you should buy a player, you really should be buying a player that at least has a medium to high ceiling associated with it, regardless of the floor. I don't think the floor is anywhere near as important as the ceiling when it comes to most of the players, if not all of the players in your squad. We'll say most, actually. There's some spots where expected minutes change it, but that's not important for now. And then lastly is leveraging physicality. As the league becomes increasingly more physical, when he finds himself in that right half space, to create the separation between him and the defender, for him to get the shot off, a lot of that actually doesn't have to do with footballing ability. Yes, he can use his brain. Yes, he can use his experience like Palmer does at times, and Palmer spoke about how he did that when he was growing up, when he was smaller. But a huge element of that, if not the bigger element, is the body. And he hasn't really got that over other guys. So I would say that's, again, a negative. What are the positives? When one, penalties. Saka's out. He'll be on penalties. That's good. He might even share them with Havertz, but I think he'll take most of them. Set pieces from that right-hand side. And Arsenal, the best set piece taking team in the league, probably in the world. and have the biggest box threat. So that's great. That's a nice avenue to points. And moment. He's still quality, right? Similar to Bruno. Okay, fine. I provided a fairly strong counter argument for going with either of them. But both of them are absolute quality, and I'm not trying to take away from that. So in moments, he will find a pass, he will find a reverse pass, he'll find a shot, which other people wouldn't be able to, and as such, he'll return from there. But nowhere near to the same extent that the likes of Matthias Cunha will, in my opinion. And the second element is very important, and we shall discuss that later in the video. If Cody Gakpo and Darwin Núñez were not part of this Liverpool squad in any sense, then these two would be the front runners by a mile, and we would just be debating these two. Because the upside attached to that Leicester at home fixture is huge, and they could probably do enough damage in that one to cover themselves for when they get benched in the future. Or you could just take that one fixture and move on down the line. And we discussed that in a later section as well, because as mentioned here, they also have one of the elements which is similar to Martin Odegaard. Their problem, however, is that Darwin Núñez and Cody Gakpo do exist, and they are in that Liverpool squad. Thus, their expected minutes are nowhere near as good as you would like them to be, especially considering the price tag you are going to pay for them. Money is slightly less of an issue now that we don't really have Haaland, who we're going to touch on later, now that we don't really have Saka. Well, no one's going to have Saka, because apparently he's out till March, by the way, which is a long time, just in case some of you were thinking of holding him. I should pretty much just get rid. So yeah, they're going to get benched, both of them, and they're going to get early subs, both of them. And that's not great, right? Especially when the likes of Bruno, Odegaard, and Foden probably won't do that anywhere near as much regardless at all, okay? So that's the first negative. The positive is what I spoke about, in the sense that there is so much upside attached to the Leicester at home fixture because of how good these guys are, and really just how well Liverpool are playing at the moment. There is one other thing to discuss, and that's the fixtures after that. They're actually not that bad from an attacking standpoint. We touch on later in this video the fact that I don't really like him from a defensive standpoint too much, but from an attacking standpoint, I think Liverpool can certainly get some joy. And as such, if you are willing to accept the expected minutes risk of these two players, specifically Luis Diaz, because I think with Jota, he's competing with Diaz at 9, and he's competing with Núñez at 9, whereas Diaz is competing with Núñez and Jota at 9, but also he's got the left wing position where he can play with Cody Gakpo being benched. Albeit Núñez, Diaz has had a lot of his minutes in that centre-forward role compared to seasons gone by. I actually like this more than I probably do something like a Martin Odegaard, even though I know that Diaz, in particular, he's the one I like because I think his expected minutes will be slightly better, has the capacity to be benched. Because in a lot of squads with 8th attackers, you can almost predict the benching somewhat. Let's say he starts against Leicester. Okay, fine. Now we're going to bench him for the next game. Then maybe we'll start him the next game. And then we'll bench him after that. And you can just kind of rotate him and your 8th attacker. And he provides you with so much upside, as you just saw it in the Liverpool game, right? Absolutely blitzed them with a top performance. And that's what you're opening yourself up to. Because I'm not sure the likes of Bruno and Odegaard really have that, or at least in the same route. But there's the other element, which is actually really important with relation to these two, we touch on later. Lastly, to finish on Jota, I think he might actually start the Leicester game, considering he's had a while out, but he's been back for a while as well, and he's been training and accumulating minutes. There's a lot of upside associated there, but that will be spoken about later. Last 4 options: Bryan Mbeumo, Anthony Gordon, Ismaila Sarr, Amad Diallo. Okay, Mbeumo, I actually think this encapsulates the entire thing. You won't win, but you probably won't come last. I don't think Mbeumo is going to outscore all of these other 11 options that are presented to you, but I also don't think he'll come last. He'll probably come somewhere around the middle-ish, but I guess if you have a lot of conviction, you could say, okay, maybe he comes 3rd or 4th, and if you're fairly pessimistic, you would say he comes not in the middle, but mainly like 8th, 9th, 10th. And as such, you just don't go there. The fixtures are pretty bad, right? And even the good ones, I would guess, are away. And I think in a row, in the next 5, taking out the away fixtures, it's Arsenal at home, Liverpool at home, or Arsenal at home, Manchester City at home, Liverpool at home. It doesn't really get any worse than that. But with the way Brentford attack, with how good of a coach Thomas Frank is, with the type of player Bryan Mbeumo is, the quality, and also the number of dangerous actions, which is, I think I spoke about yesterday just a little bit, the number of dangerous actions, or actions which could directly lead to output, whereby he can get points, is a lot higher than pretty much everyone else in the league, right? Really, there's not many who can compete with him in that sense. So I think even in the tougher games, you can still get returns from him. And with the quality, set pieces, penalties, the ceiling's still there. So I don't mind it too much. But like I said, I just don't think he'll outscore all of these options, considering the firepower and upside associated to all of them. And that's why I said I think it's a safe-ish option, but you can't expect too much. But it's there. It's there. Gordon is complicated, right? And I was more bullish on him prior to the Saka injury. But with a shift in Aston Villa's play, which we're going to speak about later when we touch on Isak and why you could potentially wait on buying him, the ceiling that he's currently carrying, just because he's not really in goal scoring form and he doesn't look like he's generating too many chances to score, not just as a result of how he's playing, but more so the team's dynamics, and a lot more is falling to Isak and just these brilliant Jacob Murphy strikes as well, where he's being released into that channel or those wider right areas, and the fixture interpretation. I spoke about the Aston Villa fixture. The Man United fixture is still not an easy one because of the defensive problem they pose you. Just look at what they did away to City. I know you'll say Bournemouth scored 3, but I don't think that's maybe entirely reflective of the type of defensive unit that they are overall. And lastly, the opportunity cost. If you are going to buy someone like this, who maybe doesn't have the highest ceiling attached, okay, fine, you're missing out on Diaz, on Jota, on Foden, maybe even Bruno to an extent in terms of the firepower and the upside. And I think that is certainly something to consider if you are going it. He's got it in him. He's certainly got it in him. And after these 2 fixtures, it gets better. But you are taking a bit of a risk because you are gambling that he comes good when he hasn't shown that goal scoring form yet in the league, albeit top player, and I expect it to come eventually. Sarr is just a yes for me. I have nothing negative to say about the pick. If you want to go Saka to Sarr, absolutely do it. The transitional threats there, the threat from settled possession when Palace have the ball, like take someone like Chris Wood, for example, right? Huge threat in settled possession, but not so much in transition. Whereas Sarr's got both of those. The expected minutes have been very good for a long period of time, and I hadn't realized that until I started to look into it more recently. Very good player, good fundamentals, high ceiling. He's cheap, and magnetism I speak about here is simply because the ball seems to just go to him, right? Like in those Palace attacks, especially when Eze is not there, there's somewhat of a reliance on him, which I think is good from an FPL standpoint because of the type of player he is. And the ball just seems to go to him, and he dominates those zones. I have absolutely nothing negative to say about him. If you want to buy him, go ahead. And then Ahmad, I don't think you need to accept this risk. When I spoke about how I really liked Ahmad as an option last week or last game week, it was for the 7/8 spot and rotating as a cheap attacker, but not for a replacement for Saka. I don't trust him that much. Good option. And as a 7th or 8th, fine. But as a 6th, for me, you're compromising your squad structure too much, and I think you're limiting your upside and accepting too much risk. So yeah, if he's your 7th or 8th, cool. But if not, then the Swede, who is in absolutely sensational form, when I checked, was only at 50% effective ownership for the last game week, which means roughly half of you will own him and half of you won't. I imagine, considering this channel and the people who watch it is quite engaged and people are doing so well in the comments, that it's more like a 60-40, 65-35 split. That means thousands of you, quite literally, don't own him. And do you need to? Because obviously he's hurt your rank a lot in recent weeks. Personally, for me, I do not think so. Not in the next 2 weeks. Okay, of course he can score and of course he can haul in both games. But prioritization is key in FPL. You are likely to have opportunities, not so much problems, but opportunities elsewhere. For example, with the sale of Saka, to get the right midfielder and attack the upside associated with them. To shift your defense around and go for someone like Vardio or Trent or Van Dijk if you fancy it. Or maybe a Munoz in 19 and you need to save the transfer for Southampton at home. Or just securing the defense a little bit more with the likes of Robinson, right? I would say maybe not so much the defenders who aren't premium, but all of the others are bigger opportunities than getting Alexander Isak at the moment. Nicholas Jackson, very good forward to own at the moment. Good forward. I won't put him into very good at any for certain reasons, which we can discuss in solving your problem. Good/very good forward to own at the moment. Matthias Cunha, superb. Again, João Pedro, I still think is very solid. If you've got Strand Larsen, I think it's fine as well for this fixture at least. And you guys will own some others like Johan Wissa, who's someone I would love to own this season because of the value he presents at his price. Similar Chris Wood. And maybe even Kai Havertz as well, right? And Gabriel Jesus to an extent, given the fixture this week. So I think at least this week you're fine, and next week United pose a difficult enough problem defensively whereby I don't think he's essential at all. So I would be happy to fade him for 2 weeks and then get him the week after if you have other things to prioritize. And that's all I really wanted to speak about. I don't think you need to rip up your team and take hits. I think hits are largely so suboptimal this year. Now, every case will be different. I took a hit in game week 5 when Salah had Bournemouth at home to captain him, and it took weeks and weeks and weeks for it to be repaid, but it worked, right? And it also, even though I brought in Dominic Calvert-Lewin alongside Mohamed Salah, right? So it worked. And in some cases, it absolutely can do so. But some of the ones that I've seen where people are taking hits for Isak, I just disagree with quite strongly, right? 4 points is a goal. That's a lot. Like you're giving the other guy a goal head start. And I don't think you really need to do that for the reasons I've discussed. Mainly just the fact that the next two fixtures I don't think are great. And the other options, at least for this week, which is 50% of the time period I'm speaking about, are fine. Matthias Cunha, on the other hand, instead of can he wait, can he stay? And honestly, yeah. It seems to be pretty quiet around the subject at the moment. The game's on Thursday. I'm recording this at 6:01 on Monday evening. Less than 3 days until kickoff, or around that. The likelihood he gets banned is just juices by the second for that time. And given the fact that there's not too many forward options, given the fact that he's such a good asset anyway, given the fact you probably already got value sorted in him, and if he somehow manages to escape a ban, you'd probably like to keep him. I think he's great. I thought I would clear one thing up before we move on, and that is, it does say easy hold and wouldn't sell for Isak. Now, when I say easy hold, I mean if you can't or you don't have a direct route to Isak, or the route to Isak is difficult and requires a lot of sacrifices. If you've got the money to make it just in one straight move, I think it becomes far more appealing. And I don't want to just give you an off-the-cuff decision now, because maybe my views slightly changed since I made the graphics. So I'll discuss that more in solving your problem. The second element that I thought must be examined when looking at the purchase of Martin Odegaard, Luis Diaz, and Diogo Jota is presented to you here. Odegaard, as I mentioned earlier, is likely to continue as a low to medium floor, low to medium ceiling-ish asset, right? When Ipswich passes it. However, for that Ipswich game, because of the quality of the fixture, the floor and the ceiling is undoubtedly higher. That is the same case for Jota and Diaz, albeit in a slightly different fashion, given their floors and ceilings are both higher in all four cases, I guess, right, compared to Martin Odegaard. So, how important is that one fixture for you? How well does it fit into your plan? How many transfers do you have? How many problems would it cause you down the line to go there and capture the upside now? One thing I actually looked at was if I hadn't done the Foden to Guardiola move, and I only looked at it today, what else could I have done? And someone on the timeline just put up the fact that they were 0.1 off Odegaard and Jesus as a move. And I looked, could I have afforded that? And I could have. And it got me thinking like, oh, maybe I could have done that and captured a lot of upside there with that one move, but then I would have to use transfers after, not just to sell Odegaard, but maybe to sell Jesus down the line as well. Albeit I think Jesus could actually be quite a decent option, and we'll come on to him later. That is for sure in solving your problems, right? So the reason I put this element in here is because Odegaard, Diaz, and Jota are all likely transfers out at some point. For example, Jota, his expected minutes won't be nearly as good as I would say Diaz is, considering the competition at 9. Okay, so maybe you take Leicester at home and then you move him on. Same with Odegaard. Maybe you take Ipswich at home and move him on. That one extra transfer, is it worth it to have a player for this type of fixture? And then you have to decide that for yourself, right? Because they all have problems associated to them, but they don't really exist in the game week coming, only afterwards, okay? That's just something to consider. How to get Erling Haaland. Now, I put this in here for those of you who are thinking of doing that potentially on a wild card, or in general, just fancy getting him for the fixture swing and maybe looking to captain him as a high upside differential play to make some ground or create even further ground between you and the rest of the pack, which I think is a perfectly plausible idea. And I was surprised at how easy it actually was to facilitate him. I say easy, you could probably put quotation marks around that, because you have to sell Cole Palmer, which we'll come on to, but I wouldn't say there's the biggest sacrifice in the world, all things considering. So the three variables that I established, if you wish to own Erling Haaland, were that one, you had to be fine not owning Cole Palmer, because I found it very difficult to facilitate Haaland, Palmer, and Salah squads justifiably. Secondly, you have to be fine not owning a second premium defender. So, for example, let's say you have Gabriel, because he's probably the best, almost definitely the best. No Virgil, no Trent, no Vardio, none of them, right? And you have to be fine fielding Ismail Sarr every week, because realistically, he would become your 6th attacker in the side, which again, I think is fine. Like, even the second variable, you've got Munoz, Hall, and Robinson. Like, just stick that as your rotating trio, and you're absolutely fine. That's what I was initially planning on doing, and the reason for that is it's quite solid. So yeah, if you're fine owning Cole Palmer, it's actually quite easy to get this type of squad structure. The 7th and 8th attackers would be someone like Rodgers and João Pedro, and they rotate, and from there, you are absolutely fine. So, and you can still have Phil Foden in the side as well, by the way, just to show you the price point. So yeah, for me, it's actually not that difficult. And if you have the type of conviction to go against Palmer because you want Haaland, then this is a potential route. Lastly, finishing off with the premium defenders. They primarily reside in Liverpool, Manchester City, and Arsenal, so that's where we will go. I largely have the same stance on Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think the negatives associated to the variables such as Konate's absence, the fixtures after Leicester, which I've spoken about, West Ham away, Man United have enough in them to score, then Brentford away, Forest away, tough. Very, very tough to keep clean sheets, especially without Konate. And the fact that the opportunity cost for Trent is so high, considering there are so many good, cheaper options, even amongst the premiums, which allow you to facilitate greater strength elsewhere. Now, that would be justifiable to accept if Trent was performing at a level in terms of output as to what he's done in the past. But he's not because of this role. And for me, it just becomes at 7-1, because that's what it'll be after tonight. I just find it really difficult to justify. Not insanely difficult. Not to say that like I think it's a horrible move. I don't. But in context with the game, I just think there are better moves to be made when you take Leicester at home out of it. I don't think you want him that much. So yeah, that's just my opinion. But he's still not a bad asset, right? I just don't think he's great, or maybe as good as price rise would guess. Van Dijk is a bit cheaper, and a fair bit cheaper at about 0.6, and it will turn into 0.7 tonight, so he's easier to justify. He's also got the goal threat from set pieces, but again, I think it's the fixtures with Liverpool. I really don't like him after Leicester at home, and there's no Konate. And it's not just that. It's Josko Gvardiol, or as I've said here, Gvardiol, because he's got a bigger goal threat than both of them, undoubtedly, I would say. He's got better fixtures than both of them, undoubtedly, I would say, and he's cheaper than both, and that is certainly undoubtable, right? If City can limit the amount of transitions they're conceding, because they really have struggled to protect themselves against it, given the fact that they don't have Space Eater or a 6 who has a high dueling capacity, large dueling capacity, and they've had a lot of injuries at centre-back, and in general, their centre-back pairing and just the defensive unit as a whole is not exactly very transition-proof at the moment. Like their most transition-proof defense is probably the one that we saw against Nottingham Forest, but then obviously they get injuries, right? To Ruben and Nathan Ake, which is half of that gone. However, if they can do something like put Grealish in the middle, increase retention, reduce transitions, keep the ball a bit more and a bit better, and be a bit more, not purposeful, because they are purposeful with their possession, just a bit more dangerous and threatening with their possession, I think they'll have to face less of those type of transitions, and that will result in a higher likelihood of him keeping clean sheets. So yeah, I think with the type of player he is, I'm more than happy to own him. My main concern is that, like, if Kyle Walker plays right back, Lewis plays left back, he's going to play centre back. But I think there's enough set piece threat there for him, which I pair with Foden, because Foden takes set pieces as well, which I like. And across those 5 games, there's every chance that one of the centre backs gets fit, Lewis gets dropped, and Guardiola can go to left back and play in a more attacking role, which is what has worked so well for Pep Guardiola in previous times. And who knows, maybe he resorts to that. He did resort to the 3-2-5 after all, so I wouldn't be so surprised. If possible, I would sell Saliba and Timber. I think the fixtures are pretty tough in terms of keeping clean sheets, albeit Arsenal, I would still say, are the best defensive unit in the country, and neither of them carry the same attacking threat that Guardiola does. Timber obviously better than Saliba, but I still wouldn't say it's up to the Guardiola's standard. I would say, however, this is a partial luxury move. If you can make this, you're probably in a very good position, but this certainly wouldn't be a priority because Arsenal have the capabilities of keeping a clean sheet against anyone, given how good of a defensive unit they are. And, of course, both of them in their own right have some attacking up. That is all she wrote for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your support. If you have any questions, do drop them in the comments below. I should do my absolute best to get to as many as possible. And if some are suitable, I maybe even create a whole topic around them in solving your problems. Now, for those of you who haven't subscribed, who are regular watchers around here, and for those of you who are new around here, do consider subscribing to cash in on some of the luck that not only I've had to get to 39k, but so many people have had in the comments section. As you can see, if you just take a quick scroll through some of the previous videos, maybe even transfer plans yesterday, people are absolutely flying. And hopefully the analysis has certainly helped in some of those spots as well. I shall see you tomorrow for Christmas evening, and I will see you on Christmas Day for solving your problems. But until then, goodbye and have a great day. Enjoy the festive period.